This is going to be a series, I think, called Van Dwelling Philosophy. What kind of the ideas behind what I do and how I do it. It's also part of a vlog of my build on the new van I just bought. So that's really how you're going to be thinking of it right now. The big thing being that why did I buy a van instead of an RV? As you may know, I just bought this van, and this van was $19,000 because it was a 2015. I'm buying it. I bought it in February of 2017, so it's only a year and a half old. And it's only got 12,000 miles, so it's very new. It's almost practically brand new. And so I spent a lot of money for it, but it's going to last me a very, very long time. It's still under full factory warranty, bumper to bumper, and body train and drivetrain. So it's going to last me a very long time, and I'm really delighted with it, with the van so far, and I'm going to continue the build, and that's mostly what you're going to want to watch, I'm sure, is the build. So, but today I want to talk to you about why I bought a van instead of an RV. For $19,000, I could have bought a pretty darn nice RV. And so you're probably thinking, come on, Bob, you want to live in a van? That's just silly. Why would you choose to live in a van when you could be living in a nice RV? So I want to tell you why, and that's the point here, is why I chose to live in a van and have for a long time now. For 15 years, I've been living in a vehicle. I've never owned an RV. I have a website called Cheap RV Living, and I've never owned an RV. And so a lot of you will write in and ask me questions about living in an RV, and I just have to say, I don't know, because I've never lived in an RV. I don't want to live in an RV, and I know that's really hard for some of you to understand. And the point today is to trying to get this thing just right, to explain to you why I choose not to live in an RV. Now, I don't take this as a criticism. If you want to live in an RV, then that's great. I'm not in any way criticizing you. That's not my intent. A lot of people just simply can't live in a van, although I think you probably could if you tried. But I just want you to understand my thinking. And so, again, not a criticism of you or your friends or your choices. It's my choice and what the choice I've made for myself. To me, it always comes down to this simple equation. Comfort, which is what you get with an RV, you get a lot of comfort, right, is exactly the opposite of freedom. You get a lot of comfort, you get very little freedom. You get very little comfort, you get a huge amount of freedom. So it's always this balancing act. Will I have more freedom or will I have more comfort? Let's look at an extreme example. You live in a house. Most of you probably live in houses now who are watching this on YouTube. And so you get a lot of comfort, don't you? You get in on-demand heat and hot water and cooling and AC, and you got a lot of comfort. You got a lot of space. Depends on your situation, but most of you are very comfortable in your homes, your apartments. And so you get this comfort, but you got no mobility. You got a job to pay for it. Your boss tells you where you can go, when you can go. He'll let you have your whole weekend and your whole evenings off. But during the day, Monday through Friday, or whatever your schedule is, you're there. He said he writes a schedule and you are there. You have no freedom, do you? He determines where you go and when you go there. You don't. That's not your decision. Next Friday, I'm going to go there. Well, I'll go in and ask my boss. Next Friday, can I take a 3-day weekend and go here? Well, maybe he will, maybe he won't. And most likely he won't let you do it. So you don't have much freedom. You got all this comfort, but you got very little freedom. And you're going to be doing this, all this comfort with very little freedom for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years of your life. That's not what I wanted. That's not my choice. I want freedom. I give up the comfort to give the freedom. Well, that's an extreme example of living in an apartment. So, but what about if you decide to become a nomad? Well, just automatically you gain a lot more freedom by being a nomad. You can come, you can go, you go and live where you want. You don't like where you are, you turn the key, you drive away. That's freedom. But you're still limited by the choice you make of a vehicle. So let's say you choose a diesel pusher. Now the sun's come out, so let me push this down and maybe I'll get a little more shade on me. Yeah, I think that helped. So let's decide you decide you need all the maximum comfort you can get. You're going to live in a 40-foot diesel pusher. Well, you get a lot of comfort in it. I've been in some magnificent diesel pushers. Well, they're going to cost you a huge amount of money. What's it going to cost? So the first thing that comfort costs you is money, and money makes you a slave. You are a slave to the marketplace, to the dollar bill, because it makes you a slave to a job, and a job makes you a slave to a boss. He decides who you are, where you go, and what you do. You can't go when you want because it's his decision. You're on his schedule. He writes your schedule, and even if you have a lot of flexibility in your schedules, and every so often people do, you still are a slave to his schedule. So the first way that you lose comfort, you lose freedom by getting comfort, is money. You need money, and so you lose a lot of freedom. So you buy it, you decide you're going to become a nomad and get a lot more of your freedom back. Well, so you buy a great big diesel Class A. Well, you paid a huge amount of money for it, did you, right up front? You had to work longer and harder and save more to buy it. Then it costs a huge amount of money to maintain it, to drive it. And so money is just pouring out of you to own the most maximum amount of comfort on wheels, a 40-foot diesel pusher or a 40-foot fifth wheel. They're both very, very expensive to own and to operate. But let's say the exact opposite. You say, I want maximum amount of freedom and minimum amount of comfort. You move into a Prius. 50 miles to the gallon. You can buy a really good used one for $10,000. You can just jump in it. They are one of the most reliable vehicles ever made. You look at any top 10 most reliable vehicles, there will be a Prius on that list. They are incredibly reliable. And after 200,000, you may or may not have to replace the battery pack, but that doesn't change the fact in the meantime, it was extraordinarily reliable. You put almost no money into this thing. And so, and it costs nothing to operate at 50 miles to the gallon, do regular oil changes, and there's this tiny little engine. That doesn't even cost much. So it costs almost nothing to live in a Prius, but it costs a huge amount to live in a diesel pusher or a big fifth wheel. So you have this balance. You get all this comfort and very little freedom, or you get a lot of freedom and very little comfort. So it's just a matter of choice that everyone makes, and my choice is freedom. I choose this life to be free, and if it means giving up the comfort, I'm going to gladly do that. It's not what I want. I don't care about the comfort. I want freedom at all the costs. Okay, so how do you give up? How do you have to give up? Well, the big one is money. Money, living comfort costs money, a lot of it, whether it's in a home or in a fifth wheel or in an RV, versus living in a van or a minivan or a Toyota Civic, or Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla, or a Toyota Prius. There's this money always is a lot more. How does it cost you more to live in more comfort? For the same money for the amount of money that I spent to buy this almost new van, I would have gotten multiple-year-old with more miles, a lot more problem on any RV, even a Class C. Let's say one Class C is one of the cheapest, let's say I had bought a travel trailer. I could have bought a brand new travel trailer for $19,000, and I'd have gotten a bathroom and tanks and a fridge, but. So I still could have bought a brand new one, but I'd still had an old tow vehicle, and the tow vehicle was going to cost me a lot of money to keep that thing maintained. So, or if I'd bought a new tow vehicle, it would have been a much older vehicle than this 2015 van. So the money is much, much more upfront to make the purchase. Then, once you've made the purchase, you're going to get half the miles per gallon on towing any vehicle. I mean, if you're towing a small, very small, let's say you're towing a casita or a scamp, you're still at best going to get 8, 10, 12 miles to the gallon out of a really efficient tow vehicle. So you buy a diesel. Well, that's great. Diesels get really good gas mileage towing lightweights like that. But they cost so much to repair. I mean, it's a couple $200 to do an oil change in a diesel, and you do them more often. They have gallons of oil, not quarts. And then every repair is going to be 10 times more. Any repair you do, instead of hundreds, will be maybe thousands. So, no, operating and maintaining a diesel is not less in the long run. We want to think it is, but it is not. It's much more expensive. So, no matter what you're driving, if it's in an RV, it's going to be much more miles per gallon. So this van, I believe, will get 18, 19, 20 easily on a road trip. Whereas no RV is going to get much better than 10, 11, 12. That would be very exceptional to get 12 miles to the gallon out of any RV. So this is going to, so I hear there's going to be a super bloom in Death Valley and I want to run up there to it. Or there's a great concert, whatever my interests are. I want to go to see the eclipse that's coming up in August. So I want to run up to North Carolina where I get the best view. So I got a 2,000-mile road trip. Well, a 2,000-mile road trip at 8 miles to the gallon in a Class C, 6, 7, 8 miles to the gallon, or 18, 19, 20 in a van. Well, that's an easy choice. Giving up that comfort of the Class C gives me so much more mobility because I can afford to drive the crazy thing. I can afford it. I don't have to go get a job to pay for the gas to drive from here to North Carolina or to Florida to see my mom, or to Maine to see the fall colors. I love the fall colors of Maine. Or go to Alaska, 9,000-mile trip back and forth to Alaska. I can afford that at 20 miles to the gallon. But let's say I get a minivan and I'm getting 28 or 29, or a Transit Connect. I'm getting 30 miles to the gallon. Well, I can go so much further on 30 miles to the gallon than I can 7 or 8. So that's freedom. I'm free from the ownership of the dollar bill and a job who writes my schedule and tells me, and a boss who writes my schedule and tells me when I can go. That's freedom. If you live in something mobile and cheap to operate. That's why I chose a van. It's so much cheaper to operate, and I become free of a job and the addiction to money and having to absolutely have to have more money to operate my expensive RV because I need all that comfort. I give up comfort, I get freedom, period. It's just that simple with a van. Another way that an RV will cost you a lot more money is repairs. You buy an RV, you better start saving for the new roof because it's going to need one. You better start saving for a new fridge because it's going to need one, and that fridge is going to be $1,600. You're going to need repairs everywhere, all over that RV, and you better start saving. Your emergency fund needs to be double or triple in an RV because they're poorly made and they fall apart. So you're going to need a lot of money and an emergency fund to operate an RV. Not only that, but it costs a lot more just to run the thing. You got that great fridge. You love the comfort of a fridge, freezer. And you open the door, it's big. You just put things away. That's a lot of comfort. I use a 12-volt compressor fridge. It's small. I have to open the lid. I have to dig everything out to get to the bottom. I lose a lot of comfort, period. But it's $500 and I can run it off solar. You're going to be paying for propane every day for the rest of your life to run that fridge. You're going to have to be careful where you park because if it's off level, your fridge breaks and you're paying $1,600 for a new fridge. I can park any way I want, anywhere I want. My fridge doesn't care. The compressor fridges just don't care how far off level. You can get so extreme that it could damage it, but I couldn't sleep. So why am I going to do that? I don't care about level. I don't care about a bumpy road. You better care about a bumpy road with your RV fridge because it'll break on a bumpy enough road over enough time. So you got to really think about all these things, about how much it's going to cost you to get all that comfort of that fridge. You got to think about AC. You say you got to have AC and an RV furnace. Okay, well that RV furnace is going to eat your battery. You're going to have to buy more solar, or you're going to have to run your generator. You want to run an AC, you're going to run a generator. Generators aren't free. They cost a lot to buy and install. They cost a lot to run the fuel for them. So you get a small one. Now I could do that in my van. I could buy a Honda 2000 and run a portable or a window AC, but I'm still losing freedom. I lose the space. Then I'm tied to the gas station. I got to get gas for that thing. I'm tied to oil changes. I'm tied to repairs. I'm tied. The more comfort I get, the more freedom I lose. It's just an automatic. Yet you cannot, there's no magic formula. There's only a magic center balance point where you get the most you want for the least loss of the other. That's what you're trying to do. This balance of the two. For me, it's a van. A van gives me enough comfort, enough freedom, that I'm very happy with that balance. What your balance will be is something only you can decide of comfort versus freedom. Another way, so that's money. The more comfort costs money because you're going to have to buy the bigger rig and all the features of it. Comfort costs money. Money costs freedom. The formula is just that simple. I'm going to put up on somewhere along the line, probably before now, I'll have put up a page, a graphic that I think really displays the balance. So I hope you enjoyed that. Next, let's talk about mobility. The more comfort you have, the less mobility you have. So I want to be able to go in the backcountry. I drive down a dirt road. I want to be able to drive down a dirt road and not have to worry about rattling everything in my RV to pieces. And some of you are. I don't want to be tied to an RV park. Some of you don't want to be tied to an RV park or a campground. I do not. I do not want to be tied to the crowd. I want to be past the crowd. That's one of my primary goals in life, is to get past the crowds and be in solitude, in nature. That's what I call a good life. That's what I call freedom. How free are you if you can't get off road? If you can't go back to a pretty lake and go fishing? Or if you can't go back to your favorite place and just sit there without RVs all around you? How free are you if you can't do that? Well, I'm not free, and I'm not going to live that way. So that's why I choose mobility over comfort. I want the mobility. I want to go down a narrow road, a narrow forest road. Forest roads grow in. That's what happens with forest roads. They're not maintained. So they'll grow in. The limbs will grow over the top. The limbs will reach down and rip the roof right off of your RV. They can't rip the roof off of this van because there's nothing on this van to rip off other than the solar panels. And they're hard. Solar panels are much harder than you think. I've never had a problem with solar panels being ripped up by branches. But I'm so low, I can go under those branches. And if you're in a 9, 10, 12 foot RV, they're going to rip our solar panels off there. So I go under them. You have to plow through them. Same with width. The width grows in on branches, and I can go down a narrow road that you can't even possibly begin to take an RV on. Routinely, that has happened to me. I can go places in a van you can't even dream about going in any RV. It's just that simple. And so you are losing freedom to get that comfort, and I'm not prepared. That's a sacrifice. Comfort versus freedom. You make those sacrifices, and I won't. It's just a choice, but it's a choice that I've made because I don't care about all that comfort. I don't care about a toilet and a shower. Those things, not only that, but those create problems for you. You lose the freedom to be out for 2 weeks or more because you got to go dump your tanks. Those hoses hanging down will get ripped off. You go through a desert wash. Desert washes are like this. You go at the bottom, and at the right here, your hoses, your tanks, and your valves are all going to get ripped off through a desert wash. You can't drive through desert washes like I can. You'll rip off your tank valves. But I don't have any valves. I've got a very short van, it's a regular length van. I don't have valves hanging down there. I can go through this wash and go into the desert where your RV can't go. And that's what I want. I want mobility. When it's comfort versus mobility, I choose mobility. And if you choose comfort, you're going to lose that mobility. It's a trade-off you have to be ready to make. So in many ways, driving around the city, there's something you want to go see in the city and you got a 40-foot diesel pusher. Your first thought has to be, where am I going to park this 40-foot diesel pusher? Or how am I going to tow a toad? You have to have a toad because your van, your RV burns so much gas you can't afford to drive it around. So you have to pull a toad. Well, a toad really limits or restricts you. You pull a casita. That really restricts you. At least with a casita or a scamp. Any travel trailer, you can back it up. You can't even back up a toad. You've got to just simply unhook it and drive it away. So you're driving through the city. Where can you park? Where can you go? You're much more limited by that in a city than I am in a van. A van drives around in any city, parks in any parking place, goes through most parking structures. A van, even with solar panels, will go through the average parking structure. So you give up more freedom. Freedom versus comfort is always the issue with mobility. And I want most mobility and minimum comfort, and that's what I get. Finally, let's look at one more thing. Let's look at minimalism and your impact on the earth and your impact on your soul of this need to have more stuff for more comfort. It's addicting. Getting more and better is an addicting way to live. So you have comfort versus freedom in minimalism. By wanting more, always more and better and more luxury items, you gain comfort. Now, those all that stuff you're buying more and better. It gives you much more comfort. Life is much better the more money you spend on it. But you give up your freedom because now you have all this stuff that you're addicted to. You're addicted to a fridge. You can't live without a fridge and freezer. You're addicted to a furnace. You can't live without a furnace. You're addicted to a flush toilet. Addicted to a flush toilet. You can't poop in a bucket or dig a cat hole because you're addicted to a flush toilet. So, and those things all have a negative impact on this planet and a negative impact on your soul. I just believe that with the depth of my being, that being addicted to more and better luxury is terribly harmful for us as individual human beings and obviously to the planet. You can't dig up all these resources and turn them into these stuff and then throw all that stuff in the trash and not have that impact the planet. I mean, that just defies common sense. No one with a brain can think that we live these lives of luxury and it can't be negative for the planet. It is, and it's doing us harm, and it's certainly going to warm the planet. And in 100 years, the next generation of 100 years from now will be cursing us as the most selfish people that ever lived. And they'll be right. We will be. We will have destroyed their homes and their environment just for our own luxuries and for our own selfishness. It's horrible. So being a slave to stuff limits your freedom. You're a slave. Whether you're a slave to money and a job, or you're a slave to that you can't drive in the back country or go anywhere you want, or whether you're a slave to stuff. You always have comfort versus freedom, and one gives you the less of the other. The comfort and the luxury items that you crave and you're addicted to limit your freedom and steal it away from you. You don't have that freedom anymore. So it's just a matter of you finding your balance. If you're willing to work at a job longer and need more money and have to save more money, then give up and keep your comforts, then you're never going to be free. And I'm sorry. Or you may never be free. A lot of you are working 1 more year, 5 more years, 10 more years to have all the money to get all the comforts you need. And then I'm concerned then that you'll have worked all that extra time, then you'll die young, and that happens much too often, or health will fade, you won't be able to enjoy it. That's what I was worried about for myself. And I went at 52. I took way early retirement at 52, lost a lot of pension, and just went because I want freedom. I want to be free. And the only way to get that is just to get up and go and to live without comfort. So if you can just work on this balance of comfort versus freedom, and if you can just start to try to do without some of the comforts you think you can't live without, and you'll get more freedom. And the freedom is addicting. Freedom is addicting. The ability to come and go and do as you please when you please is, oh man, it's wonderful beyond words. And I think you'll find that if you'll try it, just try it. Just take a trip, camping trip in your car, whatever car you have now, take a camping trip in it. I think you'll find that freedom will offset the loss of comfort, and you'll love the freedom so much that you won't mind the loss of some of these comforts, and less comfort and more freedom and less comfort and more freedom, and finally you can be free. You can live a free life that you choose to live. That's an option for you, but you got to make some sacrifices, and all the comforts that you are addicted to now are the sacrifices. And maybe you don't. Maybe you're just willing to keep working and spend more for an RV and give up the freedom to travel and mobility and minimalism. Maybe you're willing to just damage the planet all you want because you want more comfort. You hurt future generations because your comfort is all important. If that's a choice you're making, then that's your choice. And I'm certainly not going to condemn you for it. I think it's a mistake, but it's your choice. It's your life. You live it the way you choose. So there you have it. My long and in-depth thoughts on van dwelling philosophy. Why I choose to live in a van, because I choose freedom over comfort. And if that's of interest to you, then my whole channel and my website, cheaprvliving.com, is dedicated to the purpose of telling you how you can gain freedom and still keep the maximum amount of comfort. I think I keep a lot of comfort. I'm entirely satisfied with the comfort I get out of living in a van. And I hope you can find that balance for yourself. Even if it's an older, it's a nice middle-aged van, and a casita, an older casita or older's camp. There's a good balance of comfort. Maybe that'll work perfectly for you. Or a camper on the pickup you own now. Maybe that's the comfort, that balance of comfort and freedom will be a camper or a small older RV. That's a very good balance. You can go a lot of places in a small 10, 15 foot travel trailer, that like a casita or a camp. You can go a lot of places. You get an awful lot of comfort and an awful lot of freedom. That's a good balance. Maybe that's the perfect balance for you. Get an older one that costs $2,000-$3,000. You've got a good, reliable truck. Well, that's really good balance. If you can't do a van, then that's another really good option. You should at least be open to it. Or a Class B, an older Class B. It's going to be a little more money, but man, there's a Class B. That's a camper van, like a road track or a pleasure way, that they have taken and converted to a full RV, and you get a lot of comfort and a lot of freedom. They go a lot of places. They aren't terribly expensive to operate. So that's also a very good balance. There's a balance that will work for you in the nomad life. It doesn't have to be extreme like a Prius or a car or a minivan. I think a minivan is one of the very best balances you can possibly get. You might get 24, 25, 28 miles to the gallon, quite a bit of room, quite a bit of mobility, not as good as a van, but good. And so maybe a minivan is your balance of comfort versus freedom. Always, it's just this balance you're working on of these things. And you can find a balance that will work for you, that will be within your budget. I believe that. Okay, so there you go. Just some different ideas for you to ponder and kick around. I hope you got something out of them. In the meantime, I hope you'll like us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, tell all your friends. There are choices in life that you may not be familiar with. You have options of what you can do, and I hope you will do some of those. So we'll talk to you later.